Holy, here we go again, Batman.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the NerdSync podcast. We have a really fun episode for you guys today. You know Bryce and Chris, who are on most of the podcast, but how much do you really know about them? Probably not a lot. So we're going to hopefully remedy that today by sitting down with them, just kind of chit-chatting, shooting the breeze of who they are and, you know, how everybody knows each other, who does what at NerdSync. A lot of behind-the-scenes NerdSync stuff to look forward to. So if you like that stuff, stick around for that. You get to hear about how things are run and how we used to do things in the past that was just terrible and all sorts of fun stories. So we have a lot of that stuff coming up for you guys, and I really hope you enjoy it. We'll be back next week talking to you guys about more comic book things, but we wanted to take a week to let you guys get to know us a little bit better here at NerdSync, so I hope you guys enjoy the following conversation and stick around at the end for some more of me talking. I did want to... Oh, go ahead.
I will be right back.
Okay.
Right back. 2 seconds.
Oh, man. We got to talk about Chris while he's gone.
Oh, hey, there we go. This is the first time this has happened in a long time. Somebody stepped away from the microphone. Now we have to talk about him behind their back.
Man, so Chris, right?
I mean...
What
he
bad
has
stuff?
Pool noodles on his chair. Do you see that?
He's got a Spider-Man issue hanging up in his room. These are just things that we're saying. These aren't like sort of insults or anything. And he's back. He's a white guy. That's something. In case anyone wondering at home what everybody looks like, we're all white guys.
We're all nerdy white guys.
True story. I thought we could start it off with just talking about how we all know each other, I guess.
I feel like I was wondering about that because I was like, I feel like once we get into this, we're going to have to give some background on NerdSync and how we all know each other.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just going to be like, hey, we're 3 random people talking about each other and stuff.
We've talked about it before once, like a year ago, on like the 1-year anniversary of NerdSync that had all the other people involved that are no longer involved.
I wanted to mention that at some point. I wanted to talk about all the people that have... It's weird because we haven't had a lot of people float in and out of NerdSync, but yet as far as like starting cast,
yeah,
only people
down.
left.
Yeah,
I still have that big banner thing of the NerdSync, podcast or whatever, and it's like everybody took their pictures on it.
Oh yeah, and I photoshopped everyone. That's super interesting because I don't think groups of us have met in person, but we've never all met at the same time.
We're never all in the same place at the same time.
No. And because we talked during the start of NerdSync when I was like, hey, I want to do this thing called NerdSync. I'm going to invite all of my friends and then also Bryce as well, I guess. And for some reason, you're one of the people that stuck around the longest, and I don't know why. Well, Chris was the first person I asked. I don't know if you ever knew that, Chris. You were the very first person.
No, well, I mean, you and Cameron are the only people I've ever met in real life.
Yeah.
And I
haven't
think
met Josh?
remember. Josh, he looks familiar.
Yeah.
I want to say I've seen him, but I can't place a memory on it.
So Chris and I met in high school in a graphics class where I basically got my start doing. This is me talking about me again. It's where I basically got to into Photoshop for the first time, which evolved into After Effects, which evolved into making videos, which evolved into YouTube stuff. And you were there doing probably Photoshopping things, I assume.
Well, graphics starts out with like drafting principles with lighting and printing and stuff like that, and then you get involved with Adobe InDesign, which is like Microsoft Word on steroids. Mm-hmm. And you can basically do anything in it except for manipulate photography. It's almost like if you wanted to design every single aspect of a newsletter,
right,
down to the margins.
That was always my least favorite part of the class, if I'm being honest.
Well, you do that before Photoshop, I think. It's that was like 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
That was, well, because, all right, I how the class worked for me was that everybody would do the work that I didn't want to do, and then I feel like one person in the class would do all the work, and then we would all put it on a flash drive and share it to each other's computers, and then put our names on it and pretend like we all did the work, and then we all just goofed off and played Mario Kart for the rest of the class period, which was awesome.
We had several games that we played, including but not limited to Unreal Tournament.
Yes.
Super Mario War, which is this cool indie game.
Yeah, so that's basically what graphics class was, at least from my memory, was just playing video games and goofing off, and then...
Well, you came in kind of the butt end of it, though, I remember, Scott, because you were 1 grade behind me, 1 or 2 grades behind me, I think.
I think it was just 1.
Yeah, well, I mean, I jumped into graphics to actually do graphics stuff, and...
So did I!
Well, I mean...
Don't write me off as some slacker who only signed up for the class because I thought it was an easy A.
But the longer the class went on, the more we goofed off, though, because it was starting out. I was working very closely with the teacher, Mr. Gant, and we were friends basically. And I was just blazing through the work because I thought it was easy, you know. And eventually moved on to the printing press and stuff. And then after a while, he just kind of let me do whatever I wanted to. So
right, I mean that was I had a very similar experience because I took graphics class for 4 years. And every single, just about every single day of high school, I was in that class in some way or another. I was like Mr. Gant's TA for a while. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I really did take that class for a long period just because I felt like it was an easy A. It was like a 3-hour long class where you didn't do anything but sit behind a computer.
It was.
And I'm like, yeah,
it was like
sign
2
me
periods.
Up. Yep. It even got to the point where other classes, I was able to skip math because I was like, I'm helping Mr. Gant with something. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. And then they would never follow through with that. And so I would just sit in the class and he would never know that I was supposed to be in another class. So that's how I got through high school. A lot of fun memories in that class.
Yeah, I didn't know all that.
And then Bryce, you and I met after high school in college.
Yes.
Which you are currently in and I failed out of. So that shows
you failed out of it twice.
I failed out of it twice and they let me back and then this time was a very permanent fail out. Like, no, you don't have any. I specifically remember the email reading, you do not have any more chances. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
But didn't you not fail out the second time? You just didn't get your grades up to where they wanted them to be. They were like, you're on probation, so you got to get your grades up. And you got them up above failing.
Yeah, and then they were like, no, not high enough. And then, they didn't.
You have
really
no more
want to.
chances.
Exactly. So that was fun. I specifically remember the first encounter, I guess, that I had with you.
Yeah.
You dressed in like a full suit, I think, for something. That's what I remember. I don't know if you have a different memory of a first encounter.
That might have been the first time we saw each other, probably.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I knew you only because of how much everybody picked on you.
Yeah.
And then so I kind of like maybe got in on a joke or something, and then that was it. And then for a while we just never interacted. And then until one night when I was feeling quite down, and Bryce brought me tea at night. And I was like, oh, Bryce, I don't even know you. Who are you?
I forget what it was. It was like 1:00 in the morning or something, and you were like, you posted something on Facebook about being like sick or something, and you were really kind of down and sad, feeling down.
Yeah.
And like nobody else was awake in the dorm, and so I was just like, hey, if you want something to help you feel better, I've got like, this herbal tea stuff in my room. If you want me to brew you up some. And you were like, sure.
Why not, random stranger?
I think that first interaction, though, I think it was on like a spirit day or something.
Yeah.
It was like homecoming week.
And you were dressed in a suit for something. And even you had a fedora on as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You were like fully dressed up. And I'm just like, look, I think all I said was like, looking good, Bryce. And then you were probably just like, I don't know who you are. And then
I was just like, okay, some random person in this room. Because I specifically remember I came into the room because, was it Paul that was your roommate at that point?
Yeah.
I wanted to say something to Paul. And so like I walked in and you said something along the lines of, you look good. And I was like, okay.
That explains my entire freshman semester of going to college was everyone came in to see my roommate, and then always when they left, they would be like, "What's your name again?" I'd be like, "Scott," and they'd be like, "Oh, okay." And those same people would come in and do that so often, they would just forget me, which is totally, I mean, I'm very forgettable. So they would just always, all the time, just like, what was your name? I don't really care. I'm here to see Paul. And
Scott, that's kind of what happened to me, though, in high school, because when I first met you, I thought, man, this is so weird. I don't even know his brother, who is in my grade, all that well, and he has a brother?
Yeah.
This kid, Scott, I mean, the other Niswander, I know nothing about him. I never speak to him. Why am I friends with his brother?
Yep. That was because I don't know. Andy is my brother for those listeners playing at home. He was always the much, much smarter person than I am.
He was not in my social group because he was like in a totally different sect, like in a hierarchy of our high school. He was up there with like the really smart kids with a lot of money who always do stuff like in AP classes. And I'm down there with like the Dungeons and Dragons guys. Yeah. Over in one corner of the lunchroom.
That's very much, I can totally see that. I never actually knew who he hung out with. Like me and my brother and basically my whole family never really interacted during school hours. So I have no idea what his experience was, and he has no idea what mine is. But that kind of segues into the next thing, which I wanted to talk about, kind of the dynamics of everything, the relationship to each other and what we all bring to NerdSync as a role. So yeah, I would like to think, at least for myself, to give an example, because I can't not talk about me apparently in this episode. Yeah, I would say that based off of you guys, we have this conversation a lot where I'll do something that you guys will consider like robotic or cold and calculating and not emotional at all. And I'll be like, what? Yeah. This totally makes sense. And you guys are like, what is your problem, robot?
Yeah. It's really funny because I mean, in all actuality, Scott, when Scott lived in the dorms here, Scott and I would be like, I wouldn't say at each other's throats because we're not violent people, but we would always be, there was that weird tension because every time Scott would say something, I would be like, no. And then we'd just like stare at each other and Scott would be like, what's the problem? And I'm like, what's your problem? And it was just a very base level complete difference between us as people. And that really played up a lot and still plays up a lot, especially Chris, you and I, we have many conversations about how we were both, I guess, raised differently, like we're basically polar opposite people and we argue a lot, but that's fine. I think that's fine.
Well, it doesn't bother me so much that we have different opinions, but I'll go ahead and say I don't have a whole lot of friends. But Scott, I've probably talked to you more lately than anybody else compared to somebody like my brother who I've spent countless days worth of time talking to. And people like my brother, I don't have to tell him anything or ask him anything. We just agree. And it's like our argument about the Guardians of the Galaxy situation. You know, you didn't feel it was necessary to tell me you were seeing it before we were planning on seeing it. You know, but somebody like my brother would have been like, wow, that's low. You know, are you sure you guys are friends?
So to clarify what Chris is talking about, and I don't mean to bring this up again and start like a huge debate or anything.
No, it's over.
Even though I've definitely done that to Bryce on several occasions.
Yes.
Basically what happened was I asked Chris if he wanted to go see Guardians of the Galaxy with me, and he said yes. And then the day when it came out, I went and saw it with my brother. And I still was planning on seeing it with Chris, and so I didn't see what the problem was of being like, yeah, so I just got out of the theater, totally awesome, you still up for seeing it tomorrow? And he was like, why did you see it without me already? And I'm like, well, we're still gonna see it again. I don't understand and then, so that was, I guess, me just being like an emotionless robot or something.
And we were going to see it at the IMAX, you know, and to me, having that first experience at the IMAX would color your whole impression of the movie as well. So on that angle, I was like, man, you saw the lesser experience. That's going to be your memory of that movie.
But I don't think it was. I really liked the IMAX experience. But that goes to, I guess, the base level of what I kind of uncovered, which is you only go and see movies once in theaters, or is it just once total?
Well, normally I will go see a movie once, but if there's a situation like my father, for instance, I saw Guardians of the Galaxy with him last weekend, not because I wanted to see it again, but because he hadn't seen it and I really wanted him to see it. So we went to see it again. But yeah, typically I would go for one time, make sure I see it in whatever the most, I don't know, like if it's in IMAX 3D, I'll go see it in IMAX 3D. You know, whatever the biggest experience is, that'll be my movie thing. Right.
And you said, because you were talking about how you see a movie just like once and that's your experience with it, and you don't go back to the movie theater again unless that certain scenario comes back up, which is like totally different from me, because I went and saw Avengers 6 times in both 2D and 3D and with many different groups of people, because I just loved that movie so much I wanted to watch it all of the times. I can't promise that in the future I won't have robotic calculations in my head.
Yeah, no,
but see, I think that's kind of one of those things, like you were talking about the different dynamics of our group that we have here.
Yeah.
If we all just got along like perfectly and never had any sort of arguments or rebuttal at all, then I honestly don't know that we'd be as creative. Because when it comes to being creative, you've got to take in a bunch of different opinions and see which ones kind of balance each other out. Otherwise, you're just like, well, I think this is cool. Yeah, I think this is cool too. Okay, let's put it out there. And then only a section of people actually like it. Whereas when you've got a group of people like this, you can kind of bring everything together. Like, for instance, Scott, if you were wanting to put something in a Comic Misconceptions video, and you were like, hey, I think this would be really cool, and then you showed it to Chris and I, and we were both like,
Thanks for being supportive, guys. You're fired.
It's kind of funny, though, because that's one of those things where NerdSync was kind of your baby. You came up with the idea, you started pulling people in and getting us all going, but you're also the guy that's kind of leading it. I really enjoy doing the podcast, but if it were up to me to decide on a topic every single week, I couldn't do it.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to.
I can't even do it.
You can do it a lot better than I can. And that's one of those things where, with you being kind of more like logic based in your thinking, you can be decisive about things a lot more than I can, whereas I run more on emotion.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. Even in trivial things like deciding where I want to eat, I might be on the road and drive for miles to say, okay, I'm going to this one specific restaurant, and then at the very last minute, you know what? Screw it, I want to go here, and turn into Taco Bell. Yeah. At the last possible second, been planning on doing something else all day. And, stuff like deciding on a topic is like, well, I keep thinking I'm going to do something somebody else isn't going to, want.
Right. I think that's something that I struggle with a lot when coming up with any sort of topics, is I got to make sure that not only do I hit something that people will find interesting, but especially for like the podcast, I have to make sure that we do something that not everybody's done before. That not all, because when it comes to comic book related stuff, there's not a whole lot. Everybody does like history ofs and origins and that kind of stuff. And I want to make sure that we hit on something different, maybe ask a question that nobody or a lot of people haven't asked all the time. So, let's talk about, this is a question that we get a lot in the comments about who does what at NerdSync. So basically, when this whole thing started, we had, there were so many more people. And then, and then there were fewer.
And then there were none.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, like Bryce was saying, it was mostly my baby. So I was just trying to make sure I was doing the right things that I thought were logically right. And that didn't work out so well at the beginning, but
which led to some creative discussion.
Oh yeah, just a lot of terrible decisions And but we had a lot of things like Josh was on, and he did prop building stuff, which was super good. Still some of our most highest rated or like highest viewed videos stuff, which I don't know how, I don't promote it at all, but it still gets a lot of views because people like that stuff. And he's showed interest in coming back and doing that, but I mean, who knows? We'll see where the future takes us.
I saw a little while back that he had posted on his wall a picture of the Star-Lord mask that he's trying to make. Yeah. And I was like, I knew it, and I typed a comment on it, and I was like, I knew you couldn't stay away. I knew you would come back.
It's actually really awesome because we hadn't like hung out in probably a year at that point, and he was just like, oh, hey, are you back in town? I'm like, yeah, probably never leaving. I failed out of college. And he said, well, hey, you want to hang out as I make this Star-Lord mask? I'm like, sure. And then so I was just kind of hanging out there. And it's really fun to see him work on stuff and to see his creative gears going, because he's just like, yeah, this could work, this could be awesome. And then he's just so entranced with what he's doing. It's super awesome, which is why I wanted to make those videos a long time ago. That was like one of the very first video series that we started putting out, was Behind the Frame. So if you haven't seen those, probably watch them, I guess. I don't know. They're not super great by my standards nowadays, but back then they were pretty good. I think the first episode was just him on my room floor in my dirty room building like a shoulder armor out of foam. So
yeah, it was funny because later he built like complete full props. Yeah. But the first one he built was just a shoulder pad. It wasn't
even completed. It was just like, this is a rough outline. I would go paint it and weather it and all that stuff, but whatever. We don't have time for that. You get the point. You don't need to focus on all the important stuff. But yeah, I mean, NerdSync started as a podcast, which is what it is right now, and that's gone through many, many iterations of what we talk about and who's involved with it.
I love how we still consider this to be season 1 of the actual podcast. This is definitely like season 4.
I think this is like episode something in the teens, like 15 or 14 or something like that. But really, we've done about 50 episodes, and
we're like almost a comic book.
Yeah, we're just retconning everything. Yeah, we're rebooting and retconning the podcast, because I think that works. But yeah, and then when I wanted to do, because I've always loved podcasting. Because I like to talk about stuff, I guess. And so I called up Chris, and like I said, you were the first person. I'm like, hey, let's just talk about nerdy things, I guess. And then I called up Josh, and Nick was the other one who did video game stuff on the channel for a while.
And eventually Cameron.
As well. There was somebody else.
P-Dubs.
There was P-Dubs, but I thought there was somebody else in the very beginning. I could just be miscounting. Well, obviously Bryce. But I wanted to make sure he was last before I said.
I can't think of anybody else. It was Nick, Josh, and Bryce.
Oh, you're right. I'm miscounting.
That was our starting crew.
Yeah, I'm not counting myself. I was like, there's 5 people, but I only listed 4. And then I was the 5th. Yeah, that was everybody. Nick did video game stuff on the channel for a while. He was going to do some machinima stuff. The only reason that we stopped doing all that, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the big one was that everybody just didn't have time. Everybody underestimated the things. But in terms of who does what currently, Bryce edits the podcasts. Both of you guys are on the podcast, so that's something.
Yeah, me editing the podcast was something more recent too, because up until then, I really hadn't been doing anything except being on the podcast.
Yeah, and I said, Bryce, earn your keep. And you were like, I could edit, maybe. And yeah.
Yeah, because originally, Scott, you tried to recruit me to edit the Comic Misconceptions, I believe. You were like, well, I could teach you how to video edit and stuff. And I was like, or you could not teach me something totally foreign to me and then me get super confused and not do it the way that you want.
Yep. That's probably a good call in the end, in the grand scheme of everything.
Yeah, I was like, audio, I could probably do that. Video, probably not.
Yeah. I remember at the start you had like a ton of problems with your computer. Still problems with your computer.
I still do have problems with my computer every once in a while. But yeah, when we first started trying to get me to edit the podcast, how many programs did we go through before we ended up going with Audition?
Probably 3 or 4. I think Audition was like one of the first ones. Like, you have to have this, and then you went through like different versions of Audition trying to figure out which one was working.
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't want to pay for it yet because I don't know if it's going to work. So I'm going to get this free one. and then the free one was terrible because I had already tried the free trial of the newer one. So when I went back to like version 2, I was like, this is terrible. How did anybody ever use this technology?
Yep. Oh boy. And then Chris, we are in talks of a series that you're going to be doing.
Well, I've always felt like assistant to the regional manager and not assistant regional manager, like on The Office. You know, Dwight was always pushing the fact he's assistant regional manager, and he's like, no, you're assistant to the regional manager. The difference.
Yeah. Wait, so
I've always felt that kind of way.
So are you saying that you, in your head, you're like a bigger position, but I'm like, no, Chris, you're not.
No, we're not. We're not doing that bigger positions talk again. I don't know. In reality, I don't do a whole lot for NerdSync. I was going to do the whole captions thing for the videos, but I was actually, to point the blame at you, I was waiting for you to tell me or send me videos preemptively so we could start doing it.
Oh, that's right. That's never going to happen. I always wait until the last minute before videos due. And I'm just like, I could probably get this one squeezed out by Monday and then have it scheduled for Wednesday. Nope. It's always going to be like exactly when it's due is the time I upload it.
Well, this is one of those behind the scenes things that you guys get to hear, is that Scott doesn't like anything to go on the internet without him having looked over the entire thing and made sure everything is absolutely in perfect condition.
That is 100% true.
And changed all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and changed all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys do some really good groundwork, and then I'll just make sure that everything is completely different by the time it goes up on the internet.
Because I did the captions for that one video, remember?
That's again another thing that I don't want to underestimate. I don't want to tell you guys that we're like this very close family that agrees on everything. We argue all the time, and I think it's totally great. Like Bryce was saying about, it's great to have all these different opinions and everything. And again, that was a case of me just being logical, like looking up the rules for captions. Like, no, this is how it says you're supposed to do it. And Chris is like, but it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I don't know, just follow the rules.
And that's like, when I started editing the podcast, I literally did everything. Like, you were having me add the beginning and end tags that you had, and I was even exporting the entire file. That way, all you had to do was upload it to iTunes. But then after a while, you were like, hey, before you put everything together, send it to me first, and I'll look at it and then tell you it's okay. And then after, like the next podcast after that, you were like, you know what? I'll just put the tags and stuff on myself. Go ahead and send it to me when you're done editing.
Totally unintentional. I don't think that was me saying like, hey, Bryce, you suck at this. I'm going to do this instead. I think that was just more of, I didn't have time to like send everything your way to make sure. So I'm like, I'll just do it on my own time. I don't want to like make Bryce have to give up any more of his time. And that's kind of how I am with a lot of things. Like I have Seymour, who edits some of Comic Misconceptions, and a lot of the times he'll send the file to me and I'll be like, this is good, but here's this long list of changes that I want changed, and it's like a huge long email, and then I'm like, you know what, just send me the file, I'll do it myself. And I am a kind of a control freak in that way, where I want to make sure that everything is up to at least my standards before I throw it up on the, not to say that everyone else's standards is lesser, it's just not as much, so...
It's not lesser, it's just not as much.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not as good as my own. That was
okay, Mr. Logic. Here we go.
No, but Chris, we've talked in the past about possibly getting you on board for a lot of different projects, both video projects and some physical objects. Or no, I'm making that one up. You're a writer, right?
Yes, I am. It's just I think the reason why I haven't done anything on the podcast as of late, or not the podcast, excuse me, for NerdSync as of lately, is because I took kind of a vacation from society to focus on my career and whatnot, so I could, not stress and lose my hair and everything while trying to balance, life, religion, career, love, and all these crazy things.
Aw,
that's but nice. Now things have smoothed out a little bit, so I can, take on a role. In the podcast.
It's definitely something that we talked about a lot, because I'm always, especially at the start of NerdSync, I was like, everybody think of something that you want to do and let's do it, and let's all go for it all at once and don't care whatever happens.
Oh my gosh, that was the worst.
And that was the worst idea anyone has ever thought of in the history of the universe.
Because I remember when you said that, you like started rounding everybody up for the podcast, and I was like, well, I've always been interested in possibly doing like a vlog or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, so a podcast would be really cool. I'd love to participate in that. Mm-hmm. And then like we started participating in the podcast, and you were like, okay, so Bryce, is there anything you want to do as far as NerdSync goes? And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? And you were like, original content. What are you doing original content wise for NerdSync? And I was like, I'm on the podcast. Was that not good enough?
I want everyone to know this is what Bryce is saying is almost exactly the word for word conversation that we had.
It literally was.
Because I just remember being like, well, do you ever want to like do what other value are you giving? What other original content? And Bryce just, I'm on the podcast. Is that good enough?
Yeah, I was like, I thought that's what you asked me to do.
Yeah, me and Scott also talked about that because we were talking about me writing for the website if we had one. And I was going to write something, but you were like, we need ideas. What's your original content? I'm like, I'm good at writing stuff. We can, write something, I guess.
That was something at the very, very early stages is I wanted to make sure that we weren't doing like another nerdy news type of a thing. Because I feel like that's overdone. So a lot of the things, a lot of people suggest things like do a review of this, talk about an origin of this. And I'm like, that's great. But other people do that kind of stuff. And I want to like try to branch off and do other things. And just about for any listeners, I want to say this. Every couple of months, I always go to Facebook and I always ask these two and whoever else is involved in NerdSync at the time, do we need a website? I might get a website this month. And then we all decide, maybe, but probably not. And then we just put it off for like 4 months. Guys, we could get a website this month. I could pay for it. We can make this happen.
Right.
And no, never mind. We'll wait for another 4 months. And
that's kind of the reason why we do opinion pieces, though. No, that was kind of our lead into that.
Yeah.
I think we decided too, like when we sat down and actually weighed the pros and cons, we were like, well, we already have a presence on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, like all these social media sites that we're already putting content out on. And it was like, if we had our own website, what would we actually do with it?
It would just be so it was like, a dashboard of all the NerdSync stuff. And
it wouldn't be a website with original content like you just said. It would be like a dashboard where you could see everything.
Exactly.
And it was like, is that really worth the money we'd have to pay to keep a website up and have it hosted and
design it
we'd also have to design it and make it look decent.
So that's something that we're
probably
never going to do.
Scott.
Yeah. Let's get a little bit more personal into who you people are. Who are you people? I don't even know you. As individuals. Chris, we talked about before, we alluded to earlier that you are a writer or want to be a published writer someday. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny that you should mention that I want to be a published writer because when I was very young, you can ask anybody that knew me when I was, like in grade school, and they'll tell you that I used to tell stories to people like my grandparents just for fun. I would just be rambling on and invent some kind of crazy story on a car ride, home or something. And I would invent jokes. I would come up with my own jokes and tell them to people, and they were terrible. And then later on,
can you give us an example of one?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember any of them because they are repressed memories.
Oh,
but it's. I guess that was kind of a natural transition for me because when I got older, I sort of obviously went to reading books, and I remember one of the first books I read that made me want to be a writer was The Shining by Stephen King. And I loved it so much, I said, I want to write something like this. And that was when I really got into writing. I took creative writing classes at Hanahan High School, where we went to high school. And I've been writing ever since. And apparently I'm pretty good at it. I think a lot of my stuff looks like garbage, but I put some of it on the internet, and the responses are always positive. I've had people tell me I'm incredible, amazing, all these long adjectives,
Yeah, just get a thesaurus out and start listing all the positive words you can say about Chris.
Right, but I'm very closeted about all of the things that I've written. I have so many ideas. That's all I daydream about is ideas for stories that I have, and I have it on my computer, but nobody is going to see it until it's perfect.
So I have to ask you because my brother Andy wants to be a writer. Like that's one of his goals. That's like on his bucket list. I don't think he wants to do that as a profession, but he would like to be published in some capacity. And I want to ask you what your process is Are you one of those people that has to like wait until you're struck by inspiration before you can write something? Or
okay. Look, I guess I could reveal this. I've never told anybody this before, but my process is this is behind the scenes stuff. What I do is I have an idea and I'll think about it and just stew on it forever, and then I'll try to find a song or some kind of music that I feel matches with the theme of whatever my idea is. Like if it's science fiction, I'll try to imagine if this book was a movie, what song would play during the end credits.
Yeah.
And I go through that process. I might restart a certain song over and over and over again, trying to see it in my head. And then once I find that tone or that idea that fits together, then I'll go and start to map out the characters. I'll write a quick sketch of the plot, if it was written in one paragraph, what would the plot of this book be?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of a lot of writers doing that, of finding music that fits and then playing it as they write and try to envision it in their head. And I feel like that's really good. The only thing, and it sounds like we're on the same page here about what I'm about to say, but the thing that I am a believer in is not waiting for inspiration to strike, but training your brain to get into that mood, into that zone where you can just, start being creative. And that's definitely something that you have to learn if you're going to be putting stuff out, especially if you're putting stuff out on a consistent basis as well. Good. I like that. Good answer, Chris. Bryce, let's talk about you. Who are you? What are you doing with your life?
School.
Yeah.
School is really... Right now I'm getting my bachelor's in counseling. So like clinical counseling. But immediately after this, I'm going to be going for my master's, because if you find out anything about the counseling field, it's that you really can't do anything with a bachelor's. You have to have at least a master's so they know you know what you're doing before you start messing with people's heads. And
then after that, you're going to Arkham Asylum to try and fix people?
Yes.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just move right into Gotham. There we go. That's all. I have it all figured out.
That has never turned bad in any experience anyone's had with that.
No, any psychiatrist going to Arkham? No.
Nope.
That's never been bad.
Name 8 times that's happened. You can't. Maybe you can. I don't know.
Honestly, right now, my life's pretty just kind of cruising along until I get my degree. Pretty much all I do right now is I do the podcast, I edit the podcast, I play video games when I don't have homework. So stuff like, right now in particular, stuff like League of Legends on my computer or Destiny on my Xbox. Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to talk about, is that I always say things like I don't game, I'm not a gamer, and I feel like you both are very much in that world, and and I am 100% not in it. And I think that plays up a little bit with some of the dynamic as well, because especially for the podcast we talked about before, like we'll have Bryce, who's like our entry level comic book person, and that's not insulting at all. That's just
no. I totally get that, and I that's one of the reasons I like, and I enjoy being a part of NerdSync too, is because I learn a lot of stuff while I'm doing this.
And that's what it's all about.
And exactly, that's why we're here. And so it's always been fun to me, even though like especially in the last podcast we recorded.
Yeah, the Gotham spoiler cast.
Yeah, there's like twice or 3 times in that podcast that you guys say something and I go, wait, what? And you're like, Bryce, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm sorry.
I actually really enjoy that whole aspect though, because I never know what to expect. It's like you said, Scott, you're not into gaming, and to me, gaming is just like using the bathroom. I just do it. It comes and I'm like, well, I have to play something, and I guess we should mention Scott failed out of school. Bryce is in school, and I am no longer in school because I work full time for what I went to school for. So we have 3 different stages here. Yep. And you see, even me going to work 40 hours a week, I'm just like, well, I gotta play something. I gotta play a video game, and Scott knows nothing about video games.
I just wanted to say really quickly as a final thing about about this podcast and how it works, because we do get a lot of comments and stuff about like things that we say that are wrong or something, I want to stress that we don't research anything rarely before we go on, right?
On the podcast.
On the podcast. Oh, yeah, I do a ton of research for comic misconceptions.
I was going to say, obviously, comic
Let's not-
misconceptions have to do research.
Let's not make that a thing that people think. Yeah, no. I especially me, I think I say things wrong all the time, but that's totally, that's basically the vibe that I wanted. Is not like, hey, we're super knowledgeable comic book experts and everything we say is correct. It's more just like, hey, we're people and we like talking about stuff, so this is what a normal conversation would be. With the exception of it lasts like 40 minutes and then I just make really awkward segues. So.
That's why I really like our dynamic, because like you, Scott, like you said, you're like not into video games at all, but you're really into comics, and especially now that you're doing comic misconceptions, you have all of this stuff kind of up in your head.
That's actually a misconception in itself. Luckily, my computer brain allows me to delete all the information after each episode, so it's never actually up there.
You have a USB port like in your hair somewhere.
Yeah, imagine Data from Star Trek. It just opens up and there's like a lot of LEDs and like beeping noises, and then you just hit something, and then, you're good to go.
Just clears the hard drive.
Yeah, wipe it.
Oh, I figure we should mention today is the birthday of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, hey, serendipity.
Yep.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that. We worked that in there. But
So
you were saying something?
Oh yeah, I was saying, but then like Chris is kind of like I'm
Watch your words, boy.
Yeah, I'm trying to not make
He's
it sound
the
bad.
most knowledgeable out of all of us.
Yeah, he has knowledge about a lot of things, because Chris is into comic books, but he's also into video games, but he's also on the writing scene, so he's got like a lot of you've looked at a lot of blog stuff. I know you had mentioned before, and then you're also, like you said, you have favorite people that you like to watch on YouTube, like that. Whereas I am mainly video game based. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to like comic books crossing over to video games, Chris knows a lot about that. I, on the other hand, have no idea. I might play the video game because it's like, oh, hey, cool, this is comic books, but I learn nothing from it, and I also don't make any connections either.
That's something that is difficult for me, because I guess I maybe I have this persona like I'm some comic book smart person. I don't know. I don't think that's true at all. I consider myself very unqualified to talk about comic books. So that's something that I try to, even now I'm trying to still read a lot of old comic book issues that people are calling classics that I haven't read. And so for you to say something like, Scott's knowledgeable about comics, I'm just like, not really. I guess I know where to look and I know where to start looking, but that's basically all it is. I don't know if I would say. Basically, the takeaway of this podcast is don't ever work for me if you have the option to, because I'm a terrible person apparently. So, which I can totally see. Yeah.
Communication is the key to any relationship.
And I am great at it.
Yeah,
Nobody is.
Yeah, whether we agree with each other all the time or not, we actually communicate pretty well sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to tell it like it's not, if that makes sense. I like to tell it like it is.
Well, a lot of it has to
say
do with the medium, the means of which we communicate. Like through Facebook, I know Scott and I had a disagreement a while back about something that was actually kind of stupid in reality, but it was simply because I didn't know what Scott meant, because it was over Facebook, so whoever's reading it is going to apply whatever meaning they think is behind it, and in reality Scott is like, no, it's totally this other thing,
right? And that's something that I've tried to do recently, is if there's any tension, if there's anything, I want to just call people up on Skype or a phone call or something, because that way you can hear the voice that I'm trying to say things in. Yeah. Because that usually my words get me in trouble a lot when I'm typing things like, well, I don't know about that. That sounds like a waste of time. And everyone's like, oh, okay, so you're saying that I'm a waste of time. Like, no. Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm just a terrible person. Yeah, we'll end there.
Stuff like that's led to quite a few disagreements within the group over the years.
Mm.
Over the years.
True story.
Yeah,
has it been years?
It's been 2 years.
It has been years. Literally years.
Yeah, the base definition of years. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I know I did, but now I want to go back and revisit a segment that we've done before on the podcast where I get to read some of your guys' reviews of this podcast that you left on iTunes on the podcast, I guess. So first I want to start off with someone who left a review before but updated it. It was Guitar-Sided Instruction. They said before, funny guys who seem to know their source material, don't take themselves too seriously, and are excited to talk about my favorite nerdy subjects. But now they updated it to also say, earnest effort, and I know that they are doing the best they can with the sound issues, so thanks for the shout-out. No problem, and this is something that we are still working on. Chris, I gave him a better microphone, a really good microphone that I used for a really long time. It's a Blue Yeti, if that says anything to you guys who know microphones. So hopefully you get to hear his audio quality better. Bryce, we're still working on. He's kind of like he's states away, so it's not just I can drop off a microphone to him. So that's something we're still working out. And I also upgraded my microphone recently, but also audio stuff is really elusive to me. I've never been really great at it. I've just done whatever sounds good to my ears, and I hope I'm doing something okay. I was supposed to take an audio class in college this semester, but then I failed out. So this would have sounded better had my grades been a little bit better as well. Anyway, we also have Super Camel, who says, power to the nerds, 5 stars. Love this podcast. The guys are hilarious and know their nerd material, and they have great ideas for podcasts, and I hope they continue making more. Although I might not always agree with their opinions, it's great to listen to their views and why they feel as they do. This is truly an amazing podcast. Thank you very much for that. And this kind of hits on something that we're very passionate about here on the podcast, which is that we all have different opinions, and that's totally 100% fine. We're going to say things that you guys are going to disagree with. We're also going to say things that each other disagrees with. And that is the way that it should be, because that's what makes, number one, interesting conversations. We don't just want to sit here and say, hey, this movie was great. Does everyone agree? Yes. And then that wouldn't be interesting for you guys to listen to, at all. Why would we do that? But also, I hope that it is inspiring you guys to want to get involved with, commenting on stuff, letting us know your opinions and why you feel that way. I'm a big fan of, not really debating, but just, conversing about why everyone likes certain things or dislikes certain things or, other opinion-based things. So I'm a huge fan of that kind of stuff. And that's one of the reasons that we continue to do NerdSync to this day, is because you guys leave such great comments and we have such fun conversations about this kind of stuff. And I hope that really does continue as far as it can into the future. So thank you guys again for some amazing reviews. If you want to leave your reviews to be read on the show, you can do it at iTunes. Just look for the NerdSync podcast. Obviously, you're listening to it, I don't know where, but on iTunes is where we read them off of. Your reviews also help us rank better in search, which helps more people find us, which helps, NerdSync in the long run become better as a sustainable business and helps us continue to put out these podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. So if you like that, it's, just go over there and give us a review. Give us an honest review, even if it's not 5 stars. Even if you say 1 star, these guys are terrible. Thanks for the review. Anyway, like I said, we'll be back next week talking about more comic book stuff, so we'll see you then.